When measuring inflation either by the consumer price index or the wholesale price index, what we are doing is we are taking a reference basket of goods and services, and we are tracking the price of that basket of good over the years to assess the inflationary situation in the economy. Now, in this context, two concepts are very important. One is the price reference year, and another is the weight reference year. There are thousands of goods and services which are available in an economy, and it is practically not possible to compute the average price level by taking all goods and services in the economy. So what is done in practice is a representative basket of goods and services is taken, and the price of that basket of goods and services is tracked over time. Now, how does one arrive at that reference basket of goods? In that context, the weight reference year becomes important. Now, the weight reference year is nothing but the year in which a consumer expenditure survey is undertaken to assess how much people are spending on different goods and services, and basically in the basket of goods and services, how much weightage each component receives. That is obtained through a consumer expenditure survey. Now, in India, the consumer expenditure survey is done on a quinquennial basis by the National Sample Survey Organization. And please remember that this consumer expenditure survey is not done for the purpose of arriving at the representative basket of goods to track inflation, but rather NSSO undertakes the consumption expenditure survey on every 5-year basis, which is also known as the quinquennial surveys, to assess or to compute the poverty situation in the economy, which is based on a calorific norm. The information obtained from that survey is used to arrive at the representative basket of goods, and this basket of good is tracked over time. Now, in India, now the consumer price index that is used is the consumer price index at the base 2012, and the weight reference year is also 2012. Why? Because NSSO had undertaken a consumption expenditure survey in the year 2011-12, and the information obtained from that is used to construct the representative basket of goods. Now, I will speak a bit more about the composition of the basket of goods which is used to track inflation. But before that, let me tell you the other concept which is very important while measuring inflation is the price reference year, or what we call as the base year. The base year which is used now is 11-12. That means the base reference year and the price reference year is coterminous, but this was not the scenario a few years back, because the consumer price index that we are tracking now was made available for the first time in January 2011 at the 2010 base. And in the 2010 base means the price reference year. The price reference year that was used to compute the inflation was 2010. What is the meaning of the price reference year? When we are measuring inflation, we are measuring the inflation with reference to a base year. That means we are tracking the price of goods in the subsequent years, and the reference point is the base year. That means how much prices have increased with regard to the prices prevailing in the base year. So if we have been provided with the reference basket of goods and services, now the very first year in which I compute the average price of this basket of goods and services, and this average is a weighted average, and the weights I am getting from the consumer expenditure survey. So the basket of goods and services, how much it was costing in, say, the base years. Suppose it was 2010 for the CPI series that is now used. It was initially published at 2010 base. That means we were computing the prices as they were prevailing in 2010, and we take that average price level whatever was prevailing in the base year as 100, and so with reference to 100, next year how much is that basket of goods and services is costing. Suppose if it costs say 112, that means the inflation rate is 12%. But in the next in the subsequent year, suppose the price of the basket of good has increased to 120, then please remember the base year is my year 0, in which the price level is 100. In year 1 the price level is 112. So the inflation rate, which is measuring how prices have changed over the last period, that means in year 1 compared to period 0 it was 12%. But in year 2 the price level is 120, and if I have to measure the inflation in year 2, the inflation is not 20%, but it would be how much prices have increased from the first year's level of prices, which was 112. That means the inflation rate in year 2 will be 120 minus 112 upon 112, and whatever that comes to, that would be my inflation rate, but certainly it will be less than 20%. Now, what is the problem if I don't use the base year and I just compute the inflation number from the raw average prices inflation by taking the actual price figures? The inflation number will remain the same. We are on the use of a base year doesn't change the inflation number per se, but what it does, it just makes the numbers look much more manageable. The CPI numbers, when were released in 2010, the the weight reference year that was used was 2004-5, and the price reference year of the base year that was used was 2010. That means we have been tracking the prices of goods and services as they prevailed in 2010, but what basket of goods and services to track, that was decided from a survey which was consumption expenditure survey, which was undertaken in 2005. Now, what is the problem with such way of measuring the price pressure or tracking the inflation number? The problem is that the weight reference here is telling me the consumption pattern, and I am constructing my reference basket of goods and services using that consumption pattern. Now, as we know, people's consumption pattern do change over time, and as income levels increase, the composition of food basket for people also change, and generally it is observed that when people become a bit more affluent, they use more protein products in their food basket. Now, if I am using a weight reference here which is quite dated, I may not be tracking the inflation number which actually reflects the consumption behavior of people. Now, even if I am using the consumption pattern of people of a recent time to measure the inflation, there is also a problem while measuring inflation that I will discuss with you when we talk about the biases related to inflation measurement. But for the time being, we have been talking about two things while measuring inflation either by CPI or WPI. We need a price reference year or a base year as a benchmark to the prices prevailing in that year. We are measuring how much prices have increased in the subsequent years to measure the inflation. So the base year is relevant from that point of view, and the weight reference year is needed to assess or to arrive at the representative basket of goods and services to track inflation. Now, apart from CPI, the inflation is also measured through wholesale price index. Now, the wholesale price index is tracking the prices prevailing at the wholesale level, and the CPI is measuring the prices prevailing at the retail level. That means when people like you and me go to buy goods and services, what prices we pay, that is the prices prevailing at the retail level, and how that price is changing. Inflation measured through the CPI reflects that. Whereas at the wholesale level, when goods are sold and purchased, how prices are changing at that level, that is tracked by the inflation measured through the WPI. Now, why there is a need to measure these two different variants of inflation, WPI and CPI? We are measuring inflation through CPI as well as WPI to find out the kind of frictions that is existing in the market, or to assess the kind of intermediaries structure that we have in the economy. Now, if there is a huge divergence between prices prevailing in the wholesale market and the retail market, that only tells that there are more number of intermediaries present who distort the retail price, and it also tells that the producer may not be getting what the consumer is paying, and to that extent it reflects a friction present in the economy. Now in India, the headline inflation used to be WPI, and we used to get inflation numbers on a weekly basis at a lag of 2 weeks. But the practice of measuring or computing inflation at the wholesale level on a weekly basis was dispensed with in January 2012, primarily because there used to be huge revisions, large revisions in the WPI numbers, because the data capturing mechanism was not perfect, and many agencies which were involved in reporting the price information, they were just reporting some provisional number, repeating the previous numbers, and when the actual numbers used to be reported, there used to be significant revision in the data. So it was found that the inflation measured through WPI contains more noise rather than signal about the price pressure prevailing in the economy. So it was thought that perhaps it is better to track the inflation numbers on a monthly basis with less revisions, rather than tracking on a weekly basis and having very less signal content in the inflation numbers. Now, as far as WPI is concerned, please remember that in WPI we are not incorporating services. We are primarily looking at goods only, and those goods are taken depending on their importance in the volume traded in the economy.